Well, good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. We start the show with some very sad breaking news. The Irish music legend Sinead O'Connor has died at the age of just 56. She was a troubled and beautiful soul, fearless, uncompromising, shocking, courageous. She was a rebel at heart. She took on the Catholic Church. She used a primetime performance on US TV to stage a protest, even as everyone warned her it could ruin her career. Above else, though, she enchanted millions with a song that's known across the world and across generations. Few people can truly say their voice defined an era, but Sinead's did. Put simply, nothing compared to the great sadness that we announced the passing of our beloved Sinead. Her family and her friends are devastated, and I'm sure that millions of people across the world will share that sentiment. Sinead, of course, led a very turbulent life. She always said her rebellious streak was driven by the abuse she'd suffered as a child, and that music rescued her. It certainly unleashed a creative talent that made her world famous. She struggled with her mental health for many years and talked very openly and powerfully about that. And tragically, she lost her 17-year-old son, Shane, to suicide just 18 months ago. I had a number of exchanges with Sinead and interviews over the years. They were most definitely uncensored. This was the last time I interviewed her. Sinead, we go back a long way.
We do.
I used to write about you as a young pop writer. We used to lock horns, clash, blah, blah, blah. I never doubted your talent. I mean, the one thing that rose above all the controversies, all the stuff, was that you just had this wondrous voice. And to hear you now, if anything, even richer, your voice, I think, than it was back then. It's a magical thing to hear. I mean, at your heart, you're just a great singer, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I was very young. I wasn't ready for the type of success, in inverted commas, that happened. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't really setting out to be a pop star, so I didn't really fit the mould. I was more of a punk.
She was, and she was a unique talent, a unique character. Well, I'm joined now by RTE radio presenter from Ireland, Dave Fanning. He's interviewed Sinead multiple times. Dave, very sad, this news. It really gave me a jolt when I read this just before I came on air. You knew Sinead very well. You interviewed her. She's an Irish music legend, of course. What is your reaction to this news tonight?
Dreadfully sad. I mean, an Irish cultural legend as much as an Irish music legend. Obviously, it's the music that people would know her best by. I mean, she's got about 10 studio albums. She must have 30 collaborations with some of the biggest artists around. Obviously, she took Prince's song, new pop songs, and they were really good. And with David Holmes, the Belfast musician, she had another one, an 11th one coming out. I don't know if it still will, I'm not sure. But it was the cultural impact that she had. I mean, she was self-deprecating, she was pragmatic, a very sharp observer. She was uncompromising, and she had no regrets about anything at all. And she was an absolute icon to a certain generation of Irish people. And that generation now is anything between the ages of 20 and maybe 45 or 50. The older generation, they didn't necessarily like all the things she did. Tearing up the picture of the Pope on TV 30 years ago was obviously something that didn't necessarily go down well with some people. But how prescient was she? Everything she was saying, every reason she did it, came true 10 years later with the dreadful revelations of just exactly how crazy the church was.
Yeah, I mean, she was controversial. She was outspoken, but she spoke her mind. I always felt that it was sincere. You know, I had some great run-ins with her where she'd tear into me, and the next thing we'd be drinking Guinness and she'd be smothering me in kisses and love. And she was like that. She was a contrarian figure. I think she liked rattling cages, and she liked telling you what she really thought of you, whether it was good or bad. And so, you know, I feel very, like I say, I feel very sad about this news. I also feel it probably, I don't want to guess here, but it probably can't be unconnected to the tragedy about her son, who died only 18 months ago, of course, taking his own life.
I mean, well, I don't want to be too sad all the time about something, and this is still like just kind of trying to sort of put this grief into some kind of perspective. But in some ways, she was a bit Piers Morgan. She was an agent provocateur in many ways. She really knew how to rattle people's cages and was able to stand up to whatever had to be said to her in terms of, Sinead, you're wrong. She'd say, no, here's why I'm not wrong. And she was fun and she was great. She was very fearless and fragile, often at the same time. No regrets. She did put herself into some very, very tough situations. And you kind of used to wonder and say, why is she doing this? The very first interview she did with me on the radio back in 87 direction or whatever it was. And then the last thing she did was on stage in Dublin. There's a thing in Britain called the Mercury Music Prize. Yeah. In Ireland, we call it the Choice Prize. And at Vicar Street in Dublin, she came out.
An iconic figure. And I thought you summed her up absolutely perfectly. I can already hear her ranting about you saying she was Piers Morgan. That would be just about the last thing she'd want to hear. But she'd also have a wry smile because she and I had a bittersweet but always fun relationship. Dave, thank you. I appreciate that.
Good luck. Take it easy. Thanks.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Now, they say the camera never lies, but is that true? Take a look at this photograph. It's the winner of a Sony World Photography Award. But the artist who created it ended up rejecting his prize after admitting he made it using artificial intelligence. Well, the use of AI is seemingly everywhere these days, but the more it's used, the more debate it creates. Just this afternoon, a song that uses AI to clone the voices of Drake and The Weeknd, two of the biggest selling artists in the world, has been removed from streaming services after stinging criticism from their music company over copyright laws. First, let's have a listen to what they normally sound like. The AI version of Drake and The Weeknd.
Talking to a diva, yeah, she on my nerves. She think that I need her, kick her to the curb. All I know is you couldn't have the world.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, joining me now is Nick Stewart, a music industry legend and now the chief executive of TCAT, or To Catch a Thief, an anti-piracy business, and from Israel, a historian and his best-selling author of Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari. Well, welcome to both of you. Nick Stewart, great piece in the Telegraph today in which you were quoted about this song and about that photograph, really, I think, demonstrating what a threat AI is to the creative arts. My question for you is, how serious do you think that threat is? And should it really matter, or is this in its own way another form of art?
Well, the threat is huge. We're on the edge of a precipice, and I'm not trying to be too dramatic here. It's come across so quickly as well, that's the point. The two tracks that you played, I think people need to understand. The original, it was done by Drake and The Weeknd. The AI generator listens to all Drake and all Weeknd and then puts something together that comes out as the second track you played. So there's no artist involved. It is completely generated.
Right, so here's my question for you.
Yeah.
I saw you tapping your fingers to the AI version. Spontaneously.
Yeah.
You could have stopped yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a good tune.
Yeah.
Why should we care? Why does it matter? Why couldn't Drake and The Weeknd actually think, you know what, this saves us a lot of work?
Okay. Two things. One is there's a British copyright law which dates back to 1988. So you could say it's a bit out of date and it's been tinkered with. The other thing is passing off, which is not actually on the statute book. Passing off has been handed down through precedents, through judges, and passing off is what this is.
Which is why it's been removed.
Exactly.
But let me ask you this. What if Drake and The Weeknd, like I said, what if they decided to adopt this technology to save them having to come up with new songs? Is that possible?
No,
could it be a force for good?
No, artists don't do that.
Even if it was a big hit? It's a good song.
Well, I know what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Artists, and I'm sure if Drake was here, he would say, and he got very cross about another track that had been similarly dealt with. Artists want to do their own stuff. That's what they're in the game for. We've had situations in the past with groups who've been doing rip-offs and samples and all the rest of it. Real artists want to do their music, and they don't want anybody else.
All right, but what about the photograph, which was a beautiful photograph, so good it won an award before the guy who did it said, well, actually, AI created this. As a lover of great photography, why should we care if that's been done by artificial intelligence or by an actual human being?
Because they've infringed. It was done from the Getty Library, wasn't it? So what they did, they went into the Getty Library and they just picked it again. They scraped it all out and up it came. And they scraped it so well that
so it's theft, basically.
It's theft.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me bring in Yuval. I want to start, if I may, Yuval, by playing. This is a clip from Elon Musk talking to Tucker Carlson on Fox News last night. Very interesting what he said.
I'm going to start something which I know you could call truth GBT, or a maximum truth-seeking AI that tries to understand the nature of the universe. And I think this might be the best path to safety, in the sense that an AI that cares about understanding the universe it is unlikely to annihilate humans, because we are an interesting part of the universe.
So, Yuval, this came after he said that actually AI could lead to the end of humanity as we know it, if we allow it, because it would be a superior intelligent force, which if it managed to break out from human control, could be the end of us. And that reminded me of a conversation I had with Professor Stephen Hawking in what was his last television interview, in which he said this. Is artificial intelligence going to be the end of us? And if it's not, how do we best work with it?
Ever since the start of the Industrial Revolution, there have been fears of mass unemployment as machines replaced humans. Instead, the demand for goods and services has risen in line with the increased capabilities. Whether this can continue indefinitely is an open question, but there is a greater danger from artificial intelligence if we allow it to become self-designing, for then it can improve itself rapidly, and we may lose control.
So really interesting that Elon Musk really is now saying what Professor Hawking told me. I mean, you're an expert in this field. How worried should we be about artificial intelligence actually taking control?
We should be very worried, because what we need to understand about AI, artificial intelligence, it is the first tool that can make decisions by itself. All previous inventions in human history always empowered us. They always gave us more power because the decisions were always made by humans. If you invent a knife, the knife cannot decide whether to use it to cut salad or to murder somebody or to save their life in surgery. If you invent an atom bomb, similarly, the atom bomb cannot decide who to attack and when and where. AI is the first technology that can actually make decisions by itself. It can make decisions about its own usage and development. Nukes cannot make better nukes, but AI can make better AI. And also, AI can make and does make decisions about us. Increasingly, when you apply to a bank to get a loan, you apply to get a job, it's an AI making crucial decisions about your life. And we haven't seen anything yet. AI is just making its first tiny baby steps.
Yeah.
It's something like 10 years old. You know, to really think about it as like this is the beginning of organic life 4 billion years ago. This is the first amoeba crawling out of the organic soup. Can you imagine how Tyrannosaurus Rex would look like, or how Homo sapiens would look like, and what we'll be able to do?
Okay, well, you successfully,
this is
you
the moment for AI.
Yeah, look, you successfully terrified me and probably all my viewers. So, how do we save ourselves from the T-Rex of AI?
Well, first of all, it can also, of course, be used for good. And
Right.
so far, we are still in control, but we don't know for how many years. And therefore, we need to, first of all, understand the capabilities of AI and slow down its deployment to make sure that we use it wisely and safely. You know, the same way that a drug company cannot just release a new medicine to the public without going through a very rigorous safety checks, it should be the same with AI.
Right, but
Okay,
here's
you
the problem.
develop this-
Here's the problem, it seems to me, which is it's fine to be well-meaning. I mean, Elon Musk, I think a lot of what he does, he's a force for good in many ways. You know, all the stuff he's been involved with is to try and, I think, help rather than damage the planet. But this AI intelligence is going to get in the hands of some pretty bad people or some pretty dodgy
Absolutely.
regimes. And they're not going to have any qualms about trying to get the edge over the West or America or wherever it may be. That's where I see the real danger, is that, you know, a bit like nuclear weapons getting into rogue states' hands, is that once the wrong people have control of this, then all hell could break loose.
In the hands of the wrong people, AI could be the end of democracy. AI could also be the basis for the worst totalitarian regimes in human history. Because, you know, dictators always dreamt about following everybody and monitoring everybody all the time, but they could never do it because, you know, even the Soviet Union, you have 200 million Soviet citizens. Stalin didn't have 200 million KGB officers to follow everybody around all the time, and then to analyze you need millions of analysts to analyze all the data you collect.
Okay, so let me
now
ask
with
you.
AI, now it is becoming possible. You don't need human agents to follow us
Right.
around.
Well, that was exciting. Our sound desk, which is 2 days old today, just crashed. So that's why we went off air a little suddenly in the middle of that debate about AI. As my mother texted me, oh my God, has AI taken over? Which actually was a pretty good way of looking at it. So I'm rejoined, hopefully, by our two guests. Nick Stewart is with me, and by Yuval in Israel. Yuval, my apologies for the sudden departure from you there. I'm going to ask
technology
Nick Stewart,
never works when you need it.
yeah, I don't think it is AI, but you can never be too sure. I'll come to you in a moment, Yuval. Nick, just to round off, you were telling me a story in the break there about Oasis. Tell me what that was about.
As I'm sure your viewers know, Oasis, the Gallagher brothers, broke up. Okay, there have been talk of a reconciliation, but at the moment that's not on the table. If you go on YouTube, you will find something called ISIS, which is AISIS, talking about a lost album. An AI generator has made.
And what's it like?
It's uncannily good.
Right. So if you're an Oasis fan, why would you not want that?
No. Well, the answer is. Yes, you would. And so, but I mean, in terms of bands that have ceased to record, I mean, would people go down the route of trying to AI
We've
the
got
Beatles?
a bit of it here, I think. I mean, it is fascinating. Let's go to Yuval finally. Yuval, give us end on some hope here for us, all right? I need to feel more hopeful than I do right now, which is I basically think the world's going to end quite soon when Terminator comes real. Do you believe that the planet has the right people in the right place to actually stop that happening?
I hope so. What we know about technology, that you can use the same technology to build completely different societies. In the 20th century, some people used trains and radio and electricity to build totalitarian regimes like the Soviet Union, and other people used exactly the same technology to build liberal democracies. It's the same with AI and with the technologies of the 21st century. We still have a choice about how to employ them. I think that AI is nowhere near its full potential, but also human beings are nowhere near our full potential. We don't really understand the full potential of our brains, of our minds. If we invest, for every dollar and every minute that we invest in developing AI, we'll invest another dollar and minute in developing our own mind and our own consciousness, I think we'll be okay.
Fascinating. Yuval Noah Harari, thank you so much. Honestly, a gripping interview. Apologies for the interruption. Well, good evening. Bad news, I'm afraid, to start. Amber Heard is still yapping. She's broken her silence, which didn't last very long, in a new sit-down interview after her defamation trial loss to ex-husband Johnny Depp, insisting that he's the liar and repeating claims that he assaulted her during their marriage. Because we've heard all this before, haven't we? And the more that she whines and plays the victim, rather like that other American actress, Meghan Markle, the less credible she becomes.
This was the most humiliating and horrible thing I've ever been through. And the vast majority of this trial was played out on social media.
Think the jury saw it?
How could they not? It would have been impossible to avoid this.
He says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight. I can't promise you I won't get physical again. I mean, this is in black and white. I understand context. But you're testifying and you're just telling me today, I never started a physical fight, and here you are on tape saying you did.
As I testified on the stand about this, is that when your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the resources that, say, you or I do with the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white.
But then there are other times, there's another tape where you're taunting him and saying, oh, tell the world, Johnny Depp, I, a man, am a victim of domestic violence.
20-second clips or the transcripts of them are not representative of even the 2 hours or the 3 hours that those clips are excerpt from.
He says he never hit you.
He
never. Is that a lie?
Yes, it is.
In the closing arguments, the Depp lawyers called your testimony the performance of a lifetime. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers.
When I asked his lawyers, why do you think you won? And the answer I got was, because she never took responsibility for anything she did in the marriage.
I did do and say horrible, regrettable things throughout my relationship.
Do you think that maybe he just had better lawyers?
I will say his lawyers did certainly a better job of distracting the jury from the real issues.
Do you stand by your testimony and your accusations against Johnny Depp about abuse?
Of course, to my dying day, will stand by every word of my testimony.
Well, I'm joined now by civil rights attorney Lisa Bloom. Lisa, lovely to talk to you again. When I watched this morning on the Today Show, I've got to be honest with you, my mind went back to Meghan Markle's Oprah Winfrey 2-hour wine-a-thon. Because the longer Amber Heard talks, frankly, the more she whines, the more she plays the victim, the more she tries to blame everybody but herself. As with Meghan Markle, the less I believe her. I just find her a really incredible, or rather uncredible witness. Or both, actually.
Well, you certainly have a right to your opinion, Piers, and I have a right to mine. I have a lot of sympathy for Amber Heard. I agree with the couple's marriage counselor that they were both abusive to each other. And there's no question that she was vilified on social media. As she says, she had to go into court past blocks and blocks of Johnny Depp superfans holding up signs that she deserved to die. I mean, this was a horrific experience for her. She stands by her testimony. My concern for her is she going to get hit with a new defamation case because now she's out there calling him a liar?
Right, and also my question would be, if Johnny Depp had lost that case, would he have been allowed on the Today Show to call his victim a liar, to stand by everything that he'd said? I don't think he would have been given the platform. So to me, there's a double standard there. You've been involved in many of these cases, I know, but I think there's a real double standard there.
I think the Today Show would have been thrilled to have him on if he lost, to tell his side, or any of these high-profile guys who are accused. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think he has a problem having a platform. He's got a massive platform. He's an A-list celebrity. He's wealthy beyond all imagining. I don't think that would have been a problem.
I don't think. Well,
I don't think this was a good idea for Amber, though.
No, I thought it was a total train wreck for her. But my point being, I don't think the Today Show would have given Johnny Depp the chance to continue playing the victim if he'd been found guilty of domestic violence. And my issue watching Amber Heard was a jury didn't believe her. You know, 95% of the verdict went Johnny Depp's way. They thought she was the liar. And in fact, the only hard evidence that came out during the entire case about domestic actual violence, physical violence, was by her, not by Johnny Depp.
Yes, but keep in mind, she used the term domestic abuse, which includes emotional abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse. She never said in that op-ed that was the center of the whole case that he physically abused her. And I also think Samantha Guthrie at the Today Show did a pretty good job. She's an attorney. I know Samantha a little bit. She's tough. And I think she did a pretty good job of saying, look, just as you just said, Piers, look, Amber Heard, the jury didn't believe you. The jury felt that you were a liar. I mean, she really, you know, did a pretty tough interview there. You know,
the problem I have, Lisa, with the whole thing with Amber Heard, and I've got no great truck for Johnny Depp, by the way. I think he came out of it pretty awfully too. But I think his behaviour since has been a lot more respectful to the process. He certainly hasn't, you know, tried to hammer things home with Amber Heard in the press by, you know, continuing to rant about her. But my whole problem with it, if you go back to that first piece that she wrote, we now live in a culture, in a society, where there is a premium to people to play the victim, to write these kind of heart-rending op-eds, positioning themselves as these terrible victims. What became clear through this case was that, at very best, this was a mutually toxic, abusive situation. She certainly wasn't the victim. And yet there she was, taking space in a major national newspaper to write this searing op-ed as a kind of representative for the victims of domestic violence. And I think that goes to, in my mind, this culture we now have, where people can build a career out of victimhood. And many of them do it. And I think it diminishes real victims, people who are really suffering, really being abused, really the victims of domestic violence. And I'm cynical about it. And I'm seeing it more and more. And I'm like, what is happening when there's that mindset?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with you, Piers, that people make careers out of victimhood, because I represent dozens and dozens of victims of sexual abuse and race discrimination right now in my law firm. And I can tell you, none of my clients want to be in this position. They wish it never happened. They wish they could just go on with their lives. Most of them never do any media. They just want justice. They just want some fairness and accountability. And with regard to Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, they can both be victims. And I think there are many marriages where both parties abuse each other, and it's horrific. And they can both be hurting. And in the article, she talked about the massive backlash that she had gotten in Hollywood for saying that she was a victim. And clearly what we've seen, a massive social media hate for Amber Heard, and what she's had to experience in the last couple of months of this trial, is not something anybody
but again, you know,
would
I
want.
agree.
She's not coming out of this a winner.
Yeah, look, I don't like the social media pile on with her. It can get very nasty, very ugly. But her insinuation that the jury must have been reading all this and that's why they found against her, I think is extremely, in my view, disrespectful to the process, to the court case, to the jury. It's like, I'm pretty sure they're not allowed to read any social media. So maybe one or two did, we don't know.
They're not supposed to.
Right, so we're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to, but you and I know. Piers, when was the last time you were off of Twitter for 6 weeks? Probably before Twitter began.
Try 6 minutes.
Most of us are pretty addicted. Most of us are pretty addicted to social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is. And to say that they were all entirely off for 6 weeks, that none of their friends and family members talked to them about it, I mean, do we really believe that?
No, but it could be. It could be,
Listen,
Lisa, couldn't it?
I work with juries.
I know.
But
ultimately,
they say one thing and they do another thing.
I know, but ultimately, to me, it comes back to this thing where, you know, all women must be believed as a starting point for these kind of cases. I think all women should be listened to and evidence should be studied.
Of course.
But I think the clear, overwhelming sort of fallout from Meghan Markle, Oprah Winfrey, Amber Heard and this court case is that actually, no, not all women should be automatically believed because sometimes they're telling porky pies.
Well, listen, no sane person says that all women must be believed. I mean, that's absurd. I think you're right.
A lot of people do say that.
Any accuser. I represent men. I don't know about a lot of people saying that, Piers. Maybe there's always fringe people on both sides of things. But I think we want to take these allegations seriously. I think what the Me Too movement has taught us, that a lot more people are sexually abused and sexually harassed than we ever knew in the past. And we're all taking this a lot more seriously, and we should. And a lot of prominent people, mostly men, have been taken down by the Me Too movement, and they should have. And so overall, it's a positive thing. But there's always going to be outliers, people who make up stories, and we have to have due process. I agree with you.
I agree with everything you just said. I think that most of the Me Too movement and Time's Up movements have been long overdue and very necessary. A lot of bad people have been held to proper account. I just think when I watch someone like Amber Heard, I see an actress and I see somebody who lost, but who doesn't want to admit she lost. She's a kind of Donald Trump.
Well,
actresses.
Johnny Depp is a more successful actor.
Sorry? Johnny Depp, yeah. But Johnny Depp...
He's a far more successful actor. Why isn't he accused of acting when he's on the stand?
I just know if Johnny Depp had lost, there's no way he'd have been allowed to carry on calling his victim a liar on primetime American television. They wouldn't have allowed it.
Well, you know, I'll defer to you. You know more about television than I do. I'm just a simple civil rights lawyer representing victims.
I'm not actually sure about that, Lisa. You're a very accomplished television performer these days. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Always good to see you. Thank you, Piers.
Well, joining me is the political analyst, probably the best analyst of American politics there is. Frank Luntz, who I'm glad to say is with me here in London. And across the pond, Fox News contributor and Outkick host Tommy Lehran. And by Michael Wolff, author of the phenomenally best-selling Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House. OK, well, look, great to see you all. Michael Wolff, let me start with you. You know Trump as well as anybody. You wrote the devastating series of books about him. Can he wriggle off all these hooks, I guess, is the obvious question. Could you see a pathway now for Donald Trump to just barrel his way once again to the White House?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that the answer is, of course. I mean, he has done it so many times before that it would be actually more surprising if this finally trips him up. I mean, I got a note from one of the Trump inner circle this morning that said we're in uncharted territory, which I think is true. To be found liable for sexual abuse in the middle of a presidential campaign is well, unprecedented. But will this have an effect on the campaign? It will certainly have an effect on the people who hate Trump. But the question is, will it have an effect on the people who love Trump? As so many things in the past that we thought would have an effect have not. So it is uncharted. We wait and see.
Yeah, it is. Tommy Lehrer, I want to play a clip from Chris Christie, who may well end up running against Trump to be president. He was on Fox News Radio and said this.
You know, his response yesterday to me was ridiculous, that he didn't even know the woman. I mean, you know, how many coincidences are we going to have here with Donald Trump, Brian? I mean, he must be the unluckiest SOB in the world. He just has, you know, random people he's never met before who are able to convince a jury that he sexually abused them. I mean, this guy, it's one person after another, one woman after another. The stories just continue to pile up. And I think we all know he's not unlucky, that he engaged in this kind of conduct.
All right, Tommy, give me some defense for Donald Trump here.
It's not a matter of being unlucky. It's a matter of the world wants to take this man down. I mean, every time I hear a charge against Donald Trump, some drummed up charge, I swear my head is going to explode. They go after this man over and over and over and over again over some BS, ridiculous charges. And let's also keep in mind that this jury did not find him liable for rape. They said that they did not believe this woman, that he raped her. But then again, they're going after him for defamation. I don't know about you, Piers, but if someone falsely accuses me of rape, I think that it's on and popping. You can say whatever you want about somebody who falsely accuses you of something as atrocious
Tommy.
as rape.
Hang on. They didn't just find against him for defamation. They found against him for sexual assault, right? So he was not found guilty of the higher charge of rape, but he was certainly found guilty by this jury in a civil case, it must be said, a different bar, of course, to a criminal case, but he was found guilty by a jury of sexually assaulting this woman.
Yeah, and again, the same woman that went on CNN and said that rape was sexy. Okay, I'm sorry if I have a little bit of suspicion here. And this, honestly, as a woman, really bothers me because there are people with legitimate sexual abuse and assault and rape claims that don't come forward for this exact reason. People that make a mockery of it, like this woman, E. Jean Carroll, who wants her moment in the sun and her moment in the spotlight. They go after this man relentlessly. And then meanwhile, you've got the Biden crime family over there. Amazing that we're focusing on this and not the fact that we know now that the Bidens were involved in a massive bribery pay-to-play scheme. The fact that the media continually focuses on Donald Trump and not what's actually going on with our current sitting president, to me, is an abomination.
All right, Frank Luntz, let's get to the polling on all this, because it's really interesting. Because after the indictment over the Stormy Daniels case, which I thought was overreach, frankly, it looked to me like if he made those payments, he was doing it probably to keep this quiet from his wife. And is that really the correct way to go after a president of the United States, to take him down for that? I don't think so. I think there are more important legal issues to come. But what was extraordinary was after that indictment, his poll numbers surged and so did his fundraising. It was almost like, you give us a reason to get behind this martyr and we're going to do it. Will that happen again now after this, do you think?
And you've got the exact word, martyr. I like to call it, it's not even victimization. It's now persecution. And Donald Trump is the perfect political person who understands communication and has united all these Republicans against those who are attacking them. And the Fox News host, she did it right there. But I want to bring it down a little bit because I know what you think about America, as do I. There's a reason why I'm here. We're destroying our democracy. We actually are. More Americans think our institutions have failed. More Americans believe our elections are fraudulent. More Americans believe democracy does not work. More Americans have lost faith and confidence in the future. And most importantly, more Americans today than ever before think their kids are going to be worse off than they are. Piers, we're destroying this gift that we were given. It's not entertainment for me. It's not being a pundit for me. I'm watching my country, while I'm alive, I'm watching my country tear itself apart. And the problem is that Donald Trump is leading that effort. It's not about the truth to him. And by the way, elections are less important than the future of our democracy.
Right.
Obviously, we have trouble here in Great Britain. But America's become the laughingstock.
I mean, Michael Wolff, I have to say, a lot of the world is shaking their head, going, you've got 320 million people in America, and you have potentially a runoff again between two people, one of whom will be 82 if he wins the election, 86 by the end, who is already showing visible signs of senility. And the other one is already under criminal indictment, has just been found guilty by a civil jury of sexual assault, has a number of other legal threats coming down the line. A lot of people away from America scratching their heads going, how is it that it's going to be these two facing off to become the most powerful person in the world?
Well, I hope you're not asking me to answer that question, because I have no idea. I mean, it is kind of astounding. I mean, somebody was saying to me the other day, well, we always love a rematch. So is that part of this, that we are seeing, and we now regard all of this as an incredible show, that these are all characters engaged in some kind of, I don't know, media event? And who is responsible for that? Well, Fox certainly has responsibility in that. All other cable channels have responsibility for that.
But right now we have a debt ceiling that we cannot solve.
Right.
We have a budgetary crisis. We have a crisis in terms of our relationship with China. All of this is having a negative impact on actually getting things done.
Well, I think you have a paralyzed Washington, in the sense that the first thought now for any side that loses an election is how to spend the next 4 years preventing whoever wins from doing anything. And this has been going on now for a long time. And I look at it and think, I'm not sure how you solve that problem.
So you're correct. You're so correct. But then the question is, what does the media do in this process? Or are they playing, as Michael Wolff says, are they playing characters in this Broadway play?
Well, take CNN tonight are going to be doing this big town hall. Caitlin Collins, one of their correspondents, will be interviewing Donald Trump in front of a lot of Republican voters, apparently. Big departure for CNN, who were full-on Trump bashing for a number of years. But, again, you can already see a huge furore erupting about them even doing this. But Trump is a bona fide candidate to be president. Why shouldn't CNN do it? But already I can see this is going to play out in a horrendously toxic way, whatever happens.
But some of this is our fault as voters, our fault as citizens. We seek news that affirms us rather than informs us. We just want to be confirmed. We surround ourselves with people who agree with us. You can't even have a political conversation at Thanksgiving or Christmas without it erupting. So the problem is, and by the way, I'm going to blame social media more than any other factor.
No question.
It's a poison. And it's time for Facebook and Google and all those companies to sit down and acknowledge the damage that's already happened and address it.
Let me bring Tommy in. I mean, Tommy, the big question for me, for the Republicans, is I felt for a while the only way Joe Biden might be able to win in 2024 is if Donald Trump is his opponent again, because he's beaten him once. He knows he'll get the anti-Trump vote out. Trump has probably got the power to win the nomination for the party, but I'm not sure he can win enough independents, for example, to become president. Why would the Republicans willfully engage in an act of self-harm when you've got, for example, a candidate like Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, who's been very successful? He's nearly half Trump's age. He hasn't got any of the baggage. I don't really get the strategy here.
Well, Piers, I'm
sorry,
not sure
Michael, that was just
true.
Michael, that was for Tommy. I'll come to you for a response to Tommy. But Tommy, that one was for you. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Tommy, can you hear me? I don't think she can.
That's the Who song.
We're going to fix Tommy's ear because I don't think she can hear me. Michael, you answer then.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think what you point out is the weakness of the situation to suddenly posit Ron DeSantis, and that's the only person that the Republicans and the media establishment have been able to posit. Oh, Ron DeSantis can run against him and do well. But everything that we've seen, except in the local Florida election, Ron DeSantis is an incredibly untried and weak candidate. He's actually a bad retail politician, which is and against Donald Trump, one of the greatest retail politicians of all time.
That is true.
It's
the only
no
caveat,
contest.
yeah, the only caveat I would put in that is that if you looked at the recent midterms, most of Trump's endorsements lost or did badly. And DeSantis was the standout Republican winner, taking a majority of 30-odd thousand to 1.5 million. I mean, he has got the scores on the board.
Well, in Florida, but we've seen again and again and again and again in the history of presidential races, governors who can't step out of their own state. It's an entirely different skill set to deal with national media over local media and local media
that
and
is
local
true.
political organizations.
Yeah, that is true. Let me bring in Tommy. I was going to ask you about DeSantis, Tommy, but your ear fell out. So we've got your ear back. So I want to ask you about somebody else. George Santos strikes me as the only person where Donald Trump looks at him and goes, wow, now that guy, that is shameless. I interviewed him in New York recently, and we had this exchange. I've been a terrible liar. I mean, would you be prepared to say that?
Sure. Like I said, well, I've been a terrible liar on those subjects.
I've been a terrible liar, said George Santos. Well, he's now been arrested for being a terrible liar, and he's got, I think, 13 charges for his lies. But he says tonight, I'm not going to resign. He intends to return to Congress to vote tomorrow and intends to run for re-election. How is America, again, I ask you as a nation, you're speaking for your country here, how can someone like George Santos, who literally lies about whether the sky is blue, how can he still be operating in Congress?
Well, again, because I am a conservative and a Republican, I don't stand up for people just because they are a conservative or Republican. So I'm not going to stand up for George Santos. I'm not going to defend him, right? I think we can do much better as a Republican Party, as conservatives. But I do find it incredibly interesting, Piers, that the rest of the mainstream media chose to run with the George Santos story today, which impacts very few people when you really look at it, instead of running with James Comer and House oversight over the Biden crime family, which I've been trying to address, because we could have potentially the then vice president, current president, taking money from foreign entities like China in the millions of dollars over a span of several years. But yet we're talking about George Santos. I'm not defending the man, but my God, you've got a man sitting in the White House who has not been held accountable for what his family has done, what his son has done. I really wish someone would talk about that. That has implications for our entirety of our national security.
Right, and certainly, Frank, that's just finally, I mean, that there is a double standard about the way Biden is treated by the media, because a lot of the media do skew to the left. And I do think if it was the Trump family that had this kind of murky stuff going on with all these payments coming into the family from all these foreign adversaries in many cases, there would be, all hell would be breaking loose.
So I go back to your original point. Is this the best we can do? And that the ad that's going to kill Donald Trump in the end is going to be a middle-aged woman looking at her daughter who's turning 18 and asking her, is this the person you're proud of? Is this the person you find as a role model? Is this the best person we can put up for president of the United States? It's going to be asked as a question. This is not about entertainment. And my concern in this whole conversation is that we're trying to score political points. And I mean this. You know me. This is not about political points. At some point, you break your democracy. At some point, the public loses.
Well, I do
faith.
think your point about social media, I do think it's got so tribal on social media. Facts no longer matter. All that matters is getting on your tribe's side and agreeing with whatever the tribe has decided is the agreed line. And facts are getting disintegrated. I've got to leave it there. I could talk about this all day long, and it's great to have you here, Frank. Please come back soon. Michael, thank you very much over there across the pond, and thank you, Tommy. It's going to be fascinating to watch how this all plays out. But again, I asked the question I asked at the start. Really, America? This is the best you can do? Come on. What's your take been on, I was with you on the night, of course, and that was a very sad evening indeed. As we've moved on now, we're beginning to look ahead as well as recognise the enormous contribution this late Queen made. As we look ahead to King Charles III, are you as encouraged as I am, and I think Arthur is, by the start he's made?
Completely, Piers. It's as though he's grown a foot taller in strength, in confidence, and I think he's drawing strength and reassurance from his subjects, and actually we, his subjects, are also drawing comfort and reassurance from his strength and for how he's conducting himself, for the way that this is just seamlessly transitioning from the late Queen, from all of her extraordinary achievements. But actually, I really do think this is going to give the whole nation real confidence. I draw huge strength from it, much more than I think any of us could possibly have expected.
Ava, do you see yourself as a subject? Do people your age even like the idea of being anyone's subject? And is that an issue for the future of the monarchy?
I think it's a difficult question at the moment in this 10-day period of mourning, because, I mean, look, it's a subject steeped in history, which I think is fascinating, and I think that a lot of people can have massive appreciation for. But, you know, I don't think that we also need to feel as subjects. I think it's perfectly okay to be quite sad about the Queen and to appreciate her legacy, but also say, do you know, there's quite a few things around the monarchy that I don't really appreciate. And
like what in your case?
Well, today, for example, I didn't really appreciate police officers using the 2022 police bill to drag protesters off the streets and say that we weren't allowed to object to the monarchy.
No, I mean, I didn't
appreciate
that. I didn't like what they were saying, but I absolutely defend their right to protest.
Correct.
And there are a body of people in this country who will agree with some of these protests. Take a look at some of the protests today.
Disgusting! Wait, I've done nothing wrong.
Now, you see, it's interesting, that particular incident, because I think it's completely disrespectful to have done that anywhere near the Queen's hearse, obviously. However, I also thought it was a big risk by the royal family to let Prince Andrew, after all that's gone on with him in the last year, walk through the streets in that way. Now, they would say, and I understand this, he was a beloved son of the Queen, and she would famously described him to people sometimes apparently as her favoured son. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but that was what was reported. But notwithstanding that, it's only a few months ago that he paid off a woman who'd accused him of sexually abusing her millions and millions of dollars, having said he'd go to court and clear his name. Is it irrational for some people to think this is completely inappropriate?
Well, I mean, he didn't pay. Let's be clear about that. We paid. We, the taxpayer, paid that. And, you know, I would say that it was disrespectful to her and her legacy, and actually to the people who love the Queen, for him to walk behind the carriage. I thought that was really disrespectful, actually. You know, I think it's really...
I'm sorry. He is a grieving son for his mother. I think it's mean-spirited. I think it's heartless. Frankly, you know, we, a nation, are grieving, but they are a family.
Yep.
A family in grief. But I think his siblings would have wanted him there.
Okay, but in any other situation, would a family walk through the entire nation to pay their respects? So they don't need to be there for the entire funeral.
This is the royal family. This is, you know, and yes, but that, I think, is a sign of the openness and the transparency with which Charles is going to govern.
If we're going to be open and transparent, we could talk about the fact that a lot of people have had to cancel the funerals for their own mothers because of the Queen and in respect and homage to the Queen. And there are a lot of people at the moment who are actually having to rent coffins because they can't afford to buy them. So if we're going to talk about respect, we should talk about it across the board, and we should have a little bit of nuance.
Well, I think that actually it's about people's love and appreciation and devotion to our monarch,
the Queen.
to the Queen,
Arthur,
the late Queen,
Arthur,
for 70 years.
What is your view of this Andrew situation?
Well, I
because
like Andrew.
I mean, I didn't like, for example, that he wore his military uniform for the vigil. Apparently, it's the only part of the entire week where he'll wear a military uniform. But if you're in one of the regiments that he did represent, I know there's a lot of ill feeling towards him from members of those regiments, that he still seems like he's representing them after what he did. Now, what do you think?
Well, look, I was there in Portsmouth when he came back after the Falklands War, and we were cheering him. And we laid his life on the line for this country. I've worked with him for years, and I really like him. And he's made a big mistake in his life, which was giving that interview to Emily Maitlis. I don't care what you say. I mean, if he'd have said to her, I did do that, I was lonely, it was a mistake, and I apologise, it would have none of this trouble. But the fact that he lied was the mistake. Now,
well, hang on, Arthur. That may not be the only...
Well, hang on. I just want to finish, Piers.
No, but my point is that may not be the only mistake he made. I mean, let's be clear. He paid a woman to avoid having his supposed day in court. He paid her millions of dollars. It may be that he was guilty of what she accused him of. Otherwise, why are you paying someone millions of dollars? We don't know that, and we're never going to find out now. But it may not have been his only mistake to do that interview.
Well, OK, fine. All right. But it was highlighted he made a mistake in his life. We've all made mistakes in our life. We'd like to be highlighted. Every one of us. You, me, this young lady.
I've never,
here.
ever had to pay 12
We haven't.
No, but you wouldn't have to do that because you're not a
prince.
prince of the realm. That's why. And the fact is that, you know, I think he should be walking behind his mother's coffin. I think he should. Of course I do. I mean, he's grieving. He's broken-hearted.
Should people who are angry about it be treated in the way that protester
I don't
was?
think people should be allowed to sort of disrupt that comment. With the Queen.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go on the other side of it.
No, I don't. I you know, I agree with Piers. You have the right to say it, but there are times when you don't do it.
Well, I think it's wrong. I think it's inappropriate to do it in the way they did it.
Yeah, that's
but I
right.
don't think they should start being hauled away, manhandled, or arrested,
Arrested,
as some of them
really
have been.
frightening,
I mean, are we really living in a country where people get arrested for exercising their right to free speech to protest about a monarchy, for example?
It's a fine balance judgment. But look, the reality is, you know, this is a democracy. And in a sense, I think they've got the right to grieve as a family. It's not Prince Andrew's choice. You know, he's got a right to grieve with his family.
You can't argue that they fought for our freedom, or, you know,
And
our
he fought for his
democracy has
country a
fought
long
for our
time
freedom.
ago.
You can't argue that he fought for our freedom, and then when someone says something you don't particularly like, arrest them.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate's uncensored return last night. It's been viewed over 1 million times so far on YouTube alone. His fans call him a misunderstood maestro of masculinity. His critics say he's a malignant, malicious misogynist. I think he's probably somewhere between the two, but last night, once again, he divided opinion.
I do mean what I say. If I were to see a girl on a private plane on Instagram, for example, I would assume that a man put her on that private plane. I would not assume she bought it herself.
What if it was...
Perhaps that makes me misogynistic.
What about the Afghan women?
There's nothing to do with me on any level.
You don't have a view?
I have a view. My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have different warlords operating in lawlessness, and there would be no way to prevent your store or your market stall getting completely robbed by someone with an AK-47, and people are going to gravitate towards a form of law and order. America left. They left a power vacuum, and the power vacuum is now full.
What about their treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough, and they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
Why can't you just say, on that, you know what, it's completely wrong?
Because it's not my point. I don't understand.
But it makes me think, it'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short people.
But they're not. They're only banning women.
Correct. They could ban all short people. They could ban all people with long hair. And none of it's anything to do with me. So they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban.
Do you think you're a misogynist?
Absolutely not. I'm not a misogynist on any level. This is one of those buzzwords they just throw at people randomly. Homophobic, racist, misogynist. They just throw it out at people.
Well, joining me now is Talk TV contributor Esther Krakow and a trembling broadcaster and journalist Jenny Kleeman, visibly recoiling in horror. Let's start with you, Jenny. He's not your idea of a role model.
Well, no, he's not. I see him as a symptom of a problem rather than a solution to it. I can understand why...
What's the problem that he's the symptom
The
for?
problem is that I think a lot of young men feel that nobody is speaking up for them. In a culture where we are encouraged to have identity politics. The only identity that isn't a good identity is a young man or a young white male. He talks in a very straight way and he gives straight answers to some questions, which I think he gives very wrong answers to. But I find him repellent. I think he talks about... He basically creates straw men that he destroys. So he will depict feminism as a particular kind of thing, a kind of man-hating thing, which it isn't.
Well, it is for some feminists.
For a small number of feminists.
I mean, there are some radical feminists who genuinely hate men.
There definitely are. There definitely are. But most people know that feminism is about just thinking that everyone should have equal opportunities regardless of...
Yeah, and one thing we know from Afghanistan, and these heartbreaking scenes today in Afghanistan of weeping female students who couldn't go to university, and men actually in Afghanistan then going out in protest for them. I mean, really heart-rending scenes, Esther, here of these young women in Afghanistan weeping because they've been told they cannot now continue their education. And then you've got male students walking out in protest. Very brave thing to do. A bit like we saw in Iran with the men protesting in support of the women being oppressed there. This is where he slightly lost me last night, Andrew Tate. There are a lot of things he says which I understand why young men, you feel a bit lost, why they gravitate to his confidence. He's very good at building business. He's proven it. He's made himself extremely rich doing it. A lot of what he says about masculinity and stuff, I completely would sign up to, actually. Yeah. And his confidence can help people. But when he was not prepared to condemn
these
10th century
barbarians
for that, because that to me is an open and shut case. If you don't condemn it, then I'm afraid you've got a problem. And it's not about sending feminists in to go to war. As I pointed out to him.
Which I actually do think is a valid point.
Well, it's fine, but a lot of women do actually fight in the armed forces.
Yeah,
so the idea that none of them do is also nonsense.
I think he was using that to kind of attack the more extreme forms of feminism that says, women can do anything a man can do. And he was using that as an example. Yeah. But I do think, you lose people when you refuse to outright condemn sort of 10th century barbarians like this. But I don't think... When he said it has nothing to do with him, I think he's not willing to get into dicey territory in that way. But it's like you speak in such absolute terms. Why
Do you think
not?
he's a misogynist?
I don't think he's a misogynist. No, I don't think so.
I mean, a misogynist means somebody who hates women.
Yeah,
I don't think he hates women.
I do think he hates women. I think he thinks women are nothing. I think he would not know what to do with you and I, Esther, because he does not know how to deal. He gives interviews to people like you or to Hugo Rifkin. He'll give interviews to men.
But a lot of women I've spoken to about... Yeah, but a lot of women...
But he's done interviews with women. I've seen them before on YouTube. And he's very polite and respectful.
Yeah, women do. A lot of women do like him.
Exactly.
There are a lot of women who don't know him who seem to hate him, ironically. But I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as he's a misogynist.
I don't think he's a misogynist, and I have a brother who's probably within his target demographic, 23, and I can understand why his message would resonate with him, because it's normal. It's normal, exactly, for young men to feel like they don't have a place in Western society, and he actually makes that point. I just think when you don't want to outright condemn 10th century barbarians like the Taliban, you tend to lose your case with more moderate people. But again, we're not his target audience.
The fact that his understanding about what's happening in Afghanistan is that it's a feminist issue rather than a human issue.
I don't think he said that.
Well, no, he did. He said, send this feminists in. It's a human issue where we made all these promises to people in Afghanistan and then we left.
Well, let's be clear. We betrayed those women.
We absolutely betrayed Biden.
Joe
As a human
Biden,
being,
in the way we pulled out of Afghanistan overnight, and we betrayed not only people who work with us, the interpreters and so on,
but people
we
who
have left
died
millions of Afghan women have just been tossed back to these barbaric
and servicemen who died for it. But the fact that he sees it, he says, oh, it's got nothing to do with me. As a human being, it should have something to do with it. As someone who says he's a proud
I agree.
Brit, it should
I
have
thought it was a
something to do
cop out there. But albeit, again, a lot of what he says, I could imagine if I was a young man, it would resonate with me, probably for the right reasons. I think he's trying to give people confidence and a belief that being masculine is not actually a stick to beat you with, right? You can be a good masculine person. He used to be applauded. Let's talk of somebody who I don't think is a shining example of this, Joe Lycett, who has spent the last month posturing away with his shiny moral halo about David Beckham being in Qatar and representing the Qataris in the World Cup and being paid for it. And then the Sun revealed yesterday a rather uncomfortable truth, which is that he had actually performed himself in Qatar, Abu Dhabi and Dubai in 2015, a series of stand-up gigs for money, Esther. Now, there's a word for this, and I call it hypocrisy.
Well, this is the thing. It's hypocrisy and it's cowardice, because he would say these things, but he wouldn't actually go to Qatar and sit on Qatari state television and say all these things. He can sit back comfortably and rage at their...
But his whole point was David Beckham shouldn't be there and shouldn't be fronting anything for the Qataris when this guy himself has taken it. And his excuse was so mealy-mouthed, Jenny. Oops, I've been caught by the sun. Well, yes, I did 2 gigs in Doha. Actually, it was 3 gigs in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Qatar. I kept it secret by writing about it in my own book. Well, no one remembers that from 7 years ago. I was paid a few £100, not keen to say exactly how much, not by Qatar, but by UK comedy promoters who were being paid by Qatar. But it was 2015, when Qatar's laws were exactly the same about homosexuality as they are today, and that went a lot further back then. And so he goes on, and then he says, oh, no, but who should I take moral lectures from? Not from the Sun. OK, what aboutery? It's not about the Sun here. It's about Joe Lycett's hypocrisy.
I think it doesn't look good for Joe Lycett, but I would say that they're different things. The World Cup is about giving soft power on the global stage
so
to
is stand-up
Qatar.
comedians who are...
Well, hang on. He was like nothing in
So are
2015.
gay comedians going to a country which they profess to hate because it bans homosexuality. They're by going there, they are basically saying, I don't care. I'm pocketing the money. It's the same argument he used against Beckham.
I think with Beckham, it's to do with being an ambassador on the global stage for a country that is trying to elevate their profile. Joe Lycett in 2015,
If I said to you, it's the old thing of Churchill. Was it Churchill and Bessie Braddock when he said he was drunk one night? He said, "Madam, would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she said, "Would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she went, "Well, I don't know, Winston." And he said, "Well, would you sleep with me for £1?" No, don't be outrageous. Well, look, we already established. He says, what kind of woman do you think I am? We know what kind of woman you are. We're haggling over the price, right? No, it was a joke. But my point about Joe Lycett is he seems to be saying, I only take a few hundred.
No,
Beckham took a few million. What's the difference?
I think you have to be careful about doing this kind of archaeology about what people have done really quite far in the past.
No, it was 7 years ago when it was illegal to be gay in Qatar.
It's been illegal to be gay there.
He knew that. Illegal to be gay in Dubai, and it was illegal to be gay in the UAE.
Once you sanction this kind of stuff, it's fair game for anybody. Like all of those sports people who wear it, it's established that when they were 18, 10 years ago,
no,
this stuff
not
came
buying
up.
it. Rank hypocrite. No. Don't want to see any more Joe Lycett's moral halo, thanks. Thank you, Pat.